Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode. This is basically the kickoff to my year-end content where I celebrate the best music of the year, in my opinion, the music that spoke to me the most, that I prefer. Of course, keep in mind with all of my lists and all of my retrospectives that this is all my opinions. These are just my favorites. I know everyone else has their own favorites. That's part of the fun of this, is that everyone gets to share what touched them, what was great to their ears, even if you might not agree or you like different things. It's just basically a way to share your tastes with people, and if people have similar tastes, maybe they'll want to check out some of the things that they haven't heard before. So that's basically what I'm doing here, is giving you guys a rundown of my favorite songs of the year in a more casual style. I'm just going to play them basically and go through them, talk a little bit about them as the song plays in the background, and give you guys my top 25 list. So let's get into the songs. I'm going to put a list of all the songs in the description so that you guys can check out the songs individually later if you want to go out and search them yourselves. I'm going to make a Spotify playlist of all these songs so that you could easily check that out if you're a Spotify user. So yeah, let's get into my top 25 songs. First on my list, I'm going to play a little bit of David Longdon and his tracks Sangfroid. So this album, this comes from Door One, his posthumous album. He unfortunately passed away last year, but I thought this was a beautiful album, and this song really stood out to me. It's just a beautiful expression, some beautiful orchestration. It sounds like it could really fit into the Big Big Train catalog, and so I thought this was a really great inclusion on the album and one of my favorite tracks from the year. Next on my list, number 24, I have Kaipa and the Bitter Setting Sun from their album Urskog. A really great symphonic tour de force. This is the closing track. It's somewhat of an epic, and it just goes through their sound and their style so well. It's just full of energy. There's some funky moments, there's some groove, and there's some great instrumental sections. It just is really a powerhouse symphonic prog song that I thought was really a treat this year on a great album. So this is The Bitter Setting Sun from Kaipa at 24. At number 23, I have Joshua Batten and his track Existential Guardian. This was from the album Learn to Live Again, which was an incredible album that the artist actually sent to me to review. And I checked it out and did a short review in a New Music Shuffle episode. A really beautiful album with a little bit of a country folk tinge to it, some singer-songwriter vibes. But I felt like this track, Existential Guardian, which is the longest piece on the album, is the most proggy of the album, so I really appreciated that. It had a bit of an Elton John Funeral for a Friend vibe at the beginning, has some great anthemic chorus, great themes and the piano playing, a little bit of a darker mood in some portions as it explores his psyche at the time, but it's a really beautiful track that's expanded and really is one of my favorites. I really enjoyed this track quite a bit. At number 22, we get into some heavier stuff here with Parius and their track Arecibo from their album The Signal Heard Throughout Space. Just really great conclusion to an epic concept album. It's really heavy. It reminds me of Haken at times with its instrumental prowess and going through different moods and melodies. It sort of is an encapsulation of the album itself, and reminds me of even the Epic Visions by Haken in the way that it tackles so many different things and goes and has this big expansive journey. Really some of the greatest progressive metal playing that I've heard this year. Just really blown away by this track in particular. Some of this album had a bit of those heavy growling type stuff, but this track really, I thought, was a great summation of the album and of that heavier sound that I sometimes really get into. So this was a great track from the year. Next I have Black Midi's Eat Men Eat from Hellfire. Really, the whole album is just such a frenetic pace and just really out there in its style, but it really connected with me in a weird way. This is usually not what I really would like because it's so chaotic and different, but I just really appreciated their flavor and their style, and to see a younger band really coming up with such cool stuff. and I thought this was a great track from it. Almost a more acoustic flavor in the style, but still with that frenetic and intricate style with these crazy vocals and things going on. Almost a demented western epic with layers of crazy fusion and addition of some wild horns in the mix. So really an expressive track that I thought was really interesting and cool this year. At number 20, I wanted to include Ryo Okumoto's track Chrysalis from the myth of the Mostrophus. A beautiful ballad on the album that features Randy McStein on vocals. Just sonic ear candy, just the whole track. There's some great like flutes and strings and all this stuff over the top of some beautiful piano playing. It's really a beautiful track that I really appreciated. A great stellar performance from Randy McStein on the vocals. Some great big expansive background vocals and things. It's a really wonderful track that really spoke to me this year and I felt had to be highlighted. Just such great work and great melodies and so beautiful. Just so epic and fun. So now we get into Dirt Poor Robins at number 19 with Enchanté from Queen of the Night. This is from their recently released Queen of the Night soundtrack, which is very old school vaudevillian in its style, that old-timey, somewhat bouncy sound. Really appreciate this track a lot. It just has some really catchy moments, some wonderful performances from the vocalists, from Kate and Neil. I really love the style and the sounds, and they just have this cool throwback energy that Deer Hunter also portrays at times, so I find myself comparing them, but it's just really fun, and this track just sticks in my head all year. I just can't help but singing that refrain, the Enchanté part, so it's just so fun of a track, and I had to highlight it on my list. So at number 18, I wanted to highlight Devin Townsend and his track Call of the Void from Lightwork. Just a super chill, laid-back track. I always associated Devin with this really aggressive, heavy style, but on this new album, he does quite a bit in a more poppier, laid-back style, and it just really speaks to me. It's just peaceful and sweet and brings a lot of calm to me. I think it's a great response to the pandemic and sort of trying to find like a lighthouse in the storm, and I think this has a lot of warmth and a lot of heart to it. It's just a really intelligent pop song with a great melodic hook. I just think it's really special and really wanted to feature it on this list. A great track from Devin Townsend. At number 17, I have Charlie Griffiths In Alluvium from Tiktalika. I really love this album, and it's only getting better in my opinion as I listen to it more. I was worried that it would be too heavy for me in its style, but I find it to be the perfect balance of a bit of that heavier thrash metal style, but balanced with some proggier moments, with some lighter moments, some great singing, some great grooves. This track has great vocals from Vladimir Lalic from Organized Chaos, almost a Daniel Gildenlow style to his vocals to me. Some tasty jazzy guitar solos. A great solo from Jordan Rudess also brings a bit of a prog flavor to this, and I just find it to be a really fascinating track. I could have picked almost anything from Charlie's album, but I just really liked this one as a great focal point for the album and a really great listen. At number 16, I have The Deer Hunter, Ring 1 Tower from Antimai. I really love this track. It just immediately spoke to me. It just has this really cool jazzy vibe, some interesting chords open it up, gets into a really cool groovy place. Love the feel of it. It's just has so much going for it. I love this whole album, just the vibe and how they took the Deer Hunter sound but added these jazzy, funkier elements to it that really brings a new dimension and adds a flavor that I just really love. And this is just such a track of ear candy of all these great, beautiful sounds, bringing in this pop direction, this jazz direction, but still infusing it with the Deer Hunter style. It's a beautiful track and a great way to end this album. So at number 15, I have Black Country New Road and their track Concord from Ants From Up There. Another band that really stood out to me this year that was one I hadn't really been very familiar with to this point. I believe this is their second album. They had a great album come out last year as well. And not quite overtly proggy, but it's this new style with these younger bands that are really trying to build this intricate and interesting music, some similar to Black Midi, but this is a more laid-back, lighter indie style to that. This has a great slow build to it, some great drumming and bass, but they also add in some really cool extra textures with some mandolin and some gentle horns. It's a really sweet, laid-back song, and it's a highlight of the album to me. A really strong album that I really appreciate, so wanted to feature in this track, Concord. Really beautiful. At number 14, I have the Flower Kings Blinded from By Royal Decree. A really cool album. There's so many tracks to pick from. It's really hard to narrow in on a certain song that I liked from this album because it's really a whole vibe. It's a really cool album in general, but I really liked Blinded. It really stood out to me as a really cool track with some saxophone, has almost a fusion-y vibe at parts, reminds me a bit of Space Revolver at times, has some of that jazzier Unfold the Future vibe. Great stuff in there, and I love the build-up at the end. It just has this really epic ending that it really builds to, and I think that really lifts this as one of my favorite pieces on the record. Just a really fun, solid Flower Kings track that delves into their past history but adds where they're at now in a great way. So really cool album, cool track. At number 13, I have The Changes by The Tangent from their album Songs from the Heart Shoulder. This is a really great epic track. Of course, the new Tangent album just is littered with 3 different epics that are all fantastic, but this that opens the album is probably my favorite of the 3, but it's close. Just has this really cool jazzy feel, jazz vibe at the beginning. It picks up its pace about 5 minutes in and gets more upbeat and fun, but it's a very autobiographical song about the COVID lockdowns and trying to get back to normal pace, and so I thought that was very a great exploration into something we all can relate to with what's been happening, and I think they did it really well, and it's just a really beautiful track that goes in so many different directions, has so many cool instrumental things in the mix that you can find endless things to grab and have fun with throughout this track. So definitely one of my favorites of the year. At number 12, I have Dim Gray's track Avalon the Tide. This is from their album Firmament. It's a much more lighter, laid-back track, but it's just so gorgeous and lush and has these beautiful keys and strings, adds so much of an atmosphere and a mood to it, and just has this explosive chorus that just really touched me when I heard it, and something that I can't get out of my head. His vocals are just so haunting and ethereal, and it's just was something that connected to me almost instantly. It's a beautiful album and track, and Dim Gray really knocked it out of the park with this. Just really great indie, folky feel, and I just absolutely adore this. I think it's excellent, and one of my favorite tracks of the year, certainly. At number 11, I have Marillion and their track Care from An Hour Before It's Dark. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. I just, my heart melts at this track. It's just so touching and special. Especially the ending is just so anthemic and beautiful and lifts you up to these heights musically, and there's a lot going on in this track. It's really split up into 4 tracks on the album, especially on the streaming version and everything. But there's so many highlights. There's some funky parts at the beginning, slow builds, beautiful instrumentation, but it's really this epic ending that really makes it for me, talking about healthcare workers, how they're angels on the earth, leading people into the next life, essentially. And it's a beautiful take, because the whole concept of the album, An Hour Before It's Dark, is basically talking about the end of your life. And some people spend that in the hospital, and it's nice that there's these angels, these healthcare workers who are able to lift them up and give them the care they need before they move on. So it's a really beautiful track that I thought was an incredible ending to the album that really stood out to me as a singular piece that just is monumental and means a lot in the grand scheme of things. At number 10, I have DiVirgilio, Morse, and Jennings with the track Julia from their Troika album. I struggled with what track to pick from this album because they're all really excellent, but I thought this was the perfect explanation of the style they were going for with those 3-part harmonies. They really knocked it out of the park with this track, and it's just beautiful sounding. Really evokes that Crosby, Stills and Nash singer-songwriter feel, but brings in their own added elements to it. It shows a little bit of collaboration because I feel like Ross Jennings brought this into the mix, but Neil helped in arranging and adding the chorus to it, making it more concise and less proggy than the original version Ross had in mind, which I think fits better in the theme of this album. But it's a beautiful track with some great harmonies, some great sounds, and I like the little outro and play out at the end that adds an additional folky flavor as well. So just a beautiful track that really stood out to me this year. At number 9, I have Haken's single Nightingale, which is a little bit of a cheat because I usually don't like to include singles where the main album is going to be coming out the next year, because I kind of want to consider this a 2023 release since that's when the main album is. But this track came so much in advance of the album itself that I felt like it was fair game for a countdown like this, and I'm sure there'll be plenty other Haken tracks to choose from for next year. But I just love this track to death. It has a jazzy quirkiness, but adds in their signature heavy sound in sections. It's the perfect combination of their proggy tendencies and their metal tendencies, and showcases a great promise for what their music will be like on their upcoming album. So really loved this track this year. Beautiful. At number 8, I have the Von Herzen brothers and their track All of a Sudden You're Gone from Red Alert and the Blue Forest. Beautiful acoustic guitar and harmony vocals with a piano backing. Beautiful piece of music, great build, soaring to a beautiful epic height. When I first heard this, which I believe this was the first single they released of the album, it just touched me deeply. It's like, this is just such a beautiful track and made me really anxious to explore the album, and it became a real highlight of the year for me. And I just think it's just gorgeous how they build this up, and the harmony vocals and just the melodies are just so lush and gorgeous. A highlight to a great album. I really love this track quite a bit. So next I have Star One and the track Prescient from Revel in Time. This is Arjen Lukason's big project with all the different singers being involved and talking about different concepts from sci-fi movies and things. This one is based on the movie Primer, which is a little bit more of an independent sci-fi with some time travel elements. But what's fascinating about this track to me is the combination of Michael Mills, who's just a vocal powerhouse on these tracks, and Ross Jennings, who's one of my favorite vocalists, who of course you heard in the Haken track, and has his own solo album that came out last year that I loved. And so it really gives you this great flavor between these two vocalists with some vocal counterpoint melodies and some really great stuff. It's probably the most proggy piece of the Star One album. A lot of the other stuff leans in a heavier metal direction, but this is a really great piece with some great vocals and a really cool melody, quirky and fun, and has that proggy vibe that I'm always looking for. So definitely a highlight for me. So at number 6, I'm picking Big Big Train and Lanterna from Welcome to the Planet. A beautiful album that came out early this year, the first posthumous David Longdon album. It's basically the last Big Big Train album that will feature David Longdon on vocals, so it had a special weight to it, and I just love this track. It feels like a bit of a sequel to Atlantic Cable from their previous album Common Ground, which was one of my top favorite tracks of that year. So I just really love the whole vibe of this. Has that beautiful opening with piano and acoustic guitar over the harmonies. Then it picks up the pace and becomes a bit more proggy, but it really just captures that essence of the band to me, of having that proggy style, but a lot of heart and a lot of storytelling atmosphere. And I think that is really done expertly well in this track, which I just fell in love with on first listen. really love this and feel like it's a great send-off of sorts to an incredible period of the band's history with David Longdon. Just really love and adore this. Alright, at number 5, I had to go with the big epic piece from Ryo's album. This is The Myth of the Mostrophus from Ryo Okumoto from the album of the same title. This is just a big epic piece, one of my favorite epics of the year. It's just an incredible piece of music that goes in so many different directions, led by Ryo's incredible keyboard playing, but he lets a lot of the other people collaborating on this shine as well. Alan Morse plays some guitar, Dave Maros is playing bass, you got Nick DiVirgilio and Ted Leonard doing vocals, Nick DiVirgilio is doing drums as well, so it feels like very much a Spocksbeard epic, but, you know, it's done by Ryo on this solo album, so it really surprised me to hear such strong Spocksbeard vibes here, but it's a beautiful track, and just talks about this great epic saga of this like Godzilla-like creature and how he's defeated by this vocals from a prog rock band. You know, it's incredibly silly and cheesy, but just expertly crafted, and it's just a wonderful track that had to be on this list. Myth of the Mostrophus. Now at number 4, I had to go with the Deer Hunter's Ring 3 Luxury from Antimai. Love this album, of course, and love all the tracks almost equally, so it's hard to pick and choose. I kind of cheated and chose 2 tracks from this, but I think this is one of the best explanations of the concept, of what they're going for, and it really sounds great and different and unique. They have this almost Hamilton-inspired rapish style vocals at the start with a stomping beat. There's those horns that are interspersed in there, but then it morphs into more of a laid-back Caribbean style sound with some steel drum and grooves. I think it's really expertly showing the 2 sides of this luxury, basically the more seedy, darker side to it, and then from the perspective of them, the people in this luxurious state, and the more laid-back, groovy style in the more second half of the track. So I think it really explores the concept really well, and is one of the best pieces from this really great album. So definitely check this out. This is the Deer Hunter Luxury. So at number 3, I've picked Porcupine Tree, the track Dignity from Closure/Continuation. I always have really fallen in love with this track. It's just from the very first listening, I just think the melodies are so gorgeous. It starts out with this more atmospheric and ambient type sound before the guitar kicks in with a really cool melody. Gives a bit of that poppier Steven Wilson influence, like the Beatles or ELO, harkening back to maybe the Lightbulb Sun era, but it's a really beautiful track with these sunny, beautiful melodies and harmonies, even though the lyrics are maybe a bit in a darker theme. And I love the middle instrumental break with keyboards, and it's a beautiful highlight of a great record, a comeback record from an incredible prog band. So I've always loved this track. Me and Jana even reacted to it and really had a fun time with it. So just an uplifting, beautiful sound that I really hope they dive into more of if they continue on with Porcupine Tree music. At number 2, it's Pure Reason Revolution and their track Scream Sideways from Above Cirrus. Really a track that blows me away just because it's this really cool extended intro with this dark atmosphere and melody going on, but it's just so fascinating and there's so much to grab hold of in the music. Then the vocal harmonies come in with a really cool melody. I love the vocal harmonies of Pure Reason Revolution. Super cool piece, very proggy and varied. Some glitchy bleeps and bloops, kind of an electronica feel at parts, somewhat like Frost is known to experiment with. And then they roll back and sit in this chill groove type section. So it just really goes through a lot of different moods and styles and sounds in this big, almost 13-minute epic track that is just really fun and is really great listening to. It has a heavier side to it, but it's really complemented well by these interesting vocals and chill grooves that come later in the track. So definitely had to highlight this as one of my favorites. I just always loved this track ever since I first heard it earlier this year. But my number one track this year is going to go to Pattern Seeking Animals and the track Time Has a Way from Only Passing Through. And I just really adore, especially the opening proggy section. There's just like this expansive proggy instrumental opening that goes through so many different moods and melodies. Great bass line, fun keyboards, some horns, get some piano and violin, giving a bit of a Latin flavor. There's almost a spaghetti western vibe to it. Just super killer playing all the way around and really creative and going through so many different moods and musical styles. And comes in with some great vocals from Ted Leonard later in the track, and it has some rocking sections as well before we get into some instrumental flourishes with dramatic horns and nice violin solos. It's a really cool, expansive, epic piece from their album that I think is maybe one of the best things that they've ever crafted together as a group, and showcases such a great talent from the group. So definitely very worthy of the top spot here. And so those are my songs of the year. I hope you guys enjoyed this list, my top 25. Let me know in the comments what songs you guys liked this year, maybe a little bit of a top list for you guys. I'd love to hear your recommendations, and if you like different songs but from some of the same albums, that is interesting as well. So thank you guys for joining me, and I hope you guys had fun with this video, and I'll catch you guys in a future episode. Bye everybody!